6 months ago, I bought a card speculating that I thought would go up in price, and just this past week, it's tripled. Yeah, its value has tripled. So, the card I'm talking about specifically is 6 from the most recent Modern Horizons set. And I have several foil copies as well as several non-foil copies. And this is one that when I saw it come out and that it was only going for like $3-4, I thought that was not nearly enough because it does such a unique effect in the game. 6 is a legendary creature, tree folk with reach, and whenever it attacks, you mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among them into your hand, and then as long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. And now that means you can cast them from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. So that's wild. There's nothing else that does anything like that in Magic. And all it took was the recent Dragonstorm Commander decks with a focus on land synergies and graveyard synergies for this card to really, shoot up in price. And so this went from being a $3-4 card to now it's an $11-12 card, and the price may even go up beyond that. So this is one of those things 6 months ago I bought several of and just was speculating on it and that it would go up, and it has. So sometimes it can take a little while. Sometimes it shoots up within a week, like the infantry shield, but other times it can take months like this, and sometimes it never goes up. But I found that the hits can cover the cost of misses in a lot of respects, because if you buy in low enough and it just never goes up, well, you're not really out too much. You just don't want to buy in at the high end. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about today. I mentioned before in a previous video about the game changers and how there's 60 plus game changers now for Commander. And before, when they first announced game changers, my decks really didn't change at all because I was only running about 2 to 3 game changers in all my decks anyways. There were a couple where I was running like 4 or 5, and I was like, okay, I need to scale this back if I want to keep this in bracket 3 territory, and so I pull some out. But for most of them, they were already only running 2 to 3, and so I was like, oh, well, I'm good. But then with this recent announcement, and they added 18 cards to things like Teferi's Protection and Seedborn Muse, and those are staples that I run in just about every deck that can run them. I was suddenly finding myself having to cut certain cards, and so that's one thing that I did. Before, I was toying with the idea of just putting all the game changers in some decks and taking all the game changers out, but honestly, I think I kind of want to try and stay in the bracket 3 camp, and to that end, I have removed all of the Ancient Tombs from my Commander decks, including my From the Vault version of it. But yeah, all these Ancient Tombs, they're fun. They can give you a little bit of a boost, but we're kind of low on the totem pole. What I really need to do, and this will probably be the idea for a future video, is to go through and just rank all of the game changers in some kind of tier list or something, because you've only got 3 to work with in a bracket 3 deck, and not all game changers are created equally. I think if you're really trying to gauge all of the game changers in what they do, how easy are they to replace, how much worse is the next best option, I think it will really say a lot about which game changers come out on top. And I think due to the nature of a lot of them, there are some game changers that are only good in conjunction if you're running a lot of other game changers, a lot of other like fast mana related stuff, And when I look at the free, if you cast your Commander cards that were introduced in Commander 2020 decks, the Ikoria ones, like Deflecting SWAT and all the other ones there. Um, I'm glad those are game changers, some of them at least. Uh, Although I'll honestly say Deflecting SWAT, maybe it might not need to be when you look at the fact that Bolt Bend exists and they're pretty similar. One of them you can play for free, the other one, you know, costs 1 red if you've got a 4 power creature out, which can be it can be interchangeable with your commander in a lot of respects. But I just didn't like that whole cycle of cards. I did not like the card that is free when you cast your commander, and so that's one of those things that I never got any of those cards just sort of on principle for my decks. I mean, I think it's not necessarily the end of the world to play some free interaction, but I just don't like the way those cards were designed, and it's just a me thing. That's a personal preference. If you want to talk about, really high-powered game changers, those are definitely among some of the top of the list, I would say. But those are ones that are never really in serious contention for me to put into any of my decks. I do have a soft spot for Teferi's Protection. I think that one's it's a lot of fun. It's nice being able to just save yourself as a get out of jail free card, so to speak. But that was kind of like, that was as far as I was willing to go. When they started making spells free if you have your commander, I was like, no, that's too far. It's too much of a auto include, it feels like. And so I am glad that cards like that are on the game changers list, because it forces you to really evaluate and say, well, what if you can't play the best in class of everything in Commander? What if you are setting limitations for yourself? And, for me, just off the top of my head, and this will be sort of a preview of what the video would be about, of just ranking everything, but I would say that things like Rhystic Study, Teferi's Protection, Seedborn Muse, all game changers, all deservedly so. But those are cards that I like to put in my decks if I can, if I'm in the colors. Smothering Tithe, I might put in more decks. That's one where I only have like a limited number of copies, and so I just kind of decide which deck wants it the most, or which one has the synergies with it the most. But even then, even if I had, infinite copies of all the game changers, you still come down to a decision of what 3 are you going to put in your deck. And that's largely going to depend on, the themes of the deck. So, yeah, I just need to really give this some more thought, mull it over, and come up with an idea for what the list is. And I do recognize that while I have an aversion to Deflecting SWAT and all the other free with your commander spells, and just not putting those in any of my decks, I know there's people out there who feel the same way about Rhystic Study and Smothering Tithe. And heck, maybe even Teferi's Protection. You just don't want to play any of those spells in your deck, and you'd rather spend your game changers on something that has more synergy with your deck, or what have you. And so I can totally understand that, and that everybody's preferences are going to be different when it comes to that. And if you have any strong feelings one way or another about the new game changer list, and cards you feel that we're missing, or cards you're glad to see on the list, feel free to leave a comment below. I love getting feedback and hearing from other people's opinions on how they feel about these changes. It really helps me when evaluating my decks. And maybe there'll come a time where I will be cutting some of what I consider the best-in-class game changers from my decks, and maybe I'll just cut all game changers entirely, or try out and experiment with some other ones. But there are some that I just want to play in all my decks. They can be annoying to play against. I'm not going to say Rhystic Study is not annoying, but it's one of those things that I just encourage people to, run more removal for these troublesome permanents. A lot of the game changers I like to play, for the most part, are permanents that can be interacted with by most colors. To various protections, a bit of a corner case because it's very tough to deal with or respond to in a meaningful way. But I don't know. That's where I'm feeling right now. And so, Ancient Tomb is probably out for now. It does make me wonder about the financial implications of the game changers because the list keeps expanding more and more, and people are, pulling game changers out of their deck to keep it bracket 3. I wonder what that will do for the price of certain game changers that are maybe some of the easier ones to cut. Is demand for them going to go down? I don't know. But it's interesting to think about it. I know that Wizards of the Coast said that there's not going to be any more changes to the ban list this year, but they could still potentially shake up the game changers list. I know I haven't said one way or the other, but I'm operating under the assumption that we won't see any changes now for the rest of the year. So we'll have to see what happens, and of course that's barring any design mistakes that cause an emergency ban to happen, but we'll just have to see how it goes. But thank you for listening. Bye.